Welcome to the Global Citizen Life podcast. Today on the show, we have Hannah Jones. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So, Hannah, you have a very different lifestyle now. You went from living in Liverpool, which is a reasonably sized city in England, to a very small village in the south of France. Why such a big change, and why did you choose that destination?
Okay. Well, firstly, I actually don't think that the change it wasn't as extreme as like big city to small village because we live right on the outskirts of Liverpool anyway. Liverpool isn't that massive, and now we live in a village, but it's on the outskirts of Perpignan, which is smaller than Liverpool. But I don't think that change has been that massive. But the change from England to France is is a big deal. The climate and and everything, and the language, and is more. It's more of a big deal.
Right, a bigger adjustment for that.
Yeah,
Okay. And you moved there with your two children, your husband and two children, is that
yeah,
correct?
yeah. I did. Yeah.
And
So my husband is half French, so he always lived in England, but he grew up speaking French a little bit in the home with his mum. So he speaks quite good French, um, but he there's big gaps in his knowledge because he didn't grow up here, and his accent is very good. So people assume he's French, but there's things that he doesn't know. So he comes across as like a slightly stupid French person, whereas I'm clearly a foreigner.
so
Um,
they cut you some more slack then because they know
yeah,
you're not
yeah,
from around
yeah. He actually once got asked if he was deaf, because he was just concentrating like a little bit harder than a normal French person would.
there.
But
Right.
yeah, it's like, no, not deaf, just English.
Yes. And how old were your kids when you first moved?
They were just turning 5 and 7.
Okay. And so how was the adjustment for them?
For them,
I'm get
actually, that was one of the best things of the whole journey. Was they did really well. They seemed to do really well with that adjustment. Um, I think it helped that before that it was COVID, and so there was a lot of like homeschooling. I don't think they were so connected with their school friends or with anyone really because we'd had all of that time of. So we moved in 2022, um, so it wasn't that long after COVID. So I think in a way that helped. But my youngest did have a problem with speaking French at first. He was really silent for about 6 months. He wouldn't speak to the teachers at all. Even if they spoke to him in English, he would just turn his head away. So
Wow.
I don't know what was going on there, really. And then just one day he sort of came out with like full French sentences. Um, so
So he's
that was
probably just
interesting.
taking it all in, just being like,
Yeah,
this is a
we were
lot. I'm just
worried.
going to take it
Yeah,
all in
yeah,
and
we
see
were
how it
worried for
goes.
a bit. The school was worried about him, but then it just all clicked, and he came out with all these words that we didn't even know. Um, Whereas my oldest son, from the start, he quite liked school, and so he just got straight into it, and he was fine.
Yeah, I guess in a way that's kind of silver lining of COVID was that they weren't in school in that kind of regular routine with their friends, and
Yeah,
then to have that change with the move.
yeah. I think when COVID happened, actually, me and Dan, my husband, said to each other, "This will be a good test of if we can cope as a four, as a little unit, because we were considering moving abroad, and we know we wouldn't we wouldn't have the big community that we've been in Liverpool a long time, so we had a big community of friends and family there. So it was kind of a good test of can we live without that?
Right. Yes, and because we were kind of blocked off from everything, so every family unit was kind of on their own for a while.
Yeah. Although that did make it sad to leave. Um, it's hard to tell your parents, like, oh, now everything's opening up again. Actually, we're going to move countries.
Now
Sorry.
we're gonna leave. Yeah. But it's not, so with travel time for you to get back, how long would that be? I'm assuming that you would still fly. So how, like, are you near
Yeah.
an airport?
Yeah. So we're in the south of France and
Mm,
Liverpool's the north of England. So we've never driven. It would take a long time to drive.
mm.
Um, but yeah, we're 20 minutes from Perpignan airport. Um, and if, yeah, flight time's only 2 hours or so, maybe 2.5. And you can get quite cheap flights. So it's not, compared to if you lived in America or whatever, it's not bad.
Yeah, so it's nice. It's sorry we're moving, but now you have a place to come visit
Yeah,
and
and we've
spend
had
some
lots of
time.
visitors. Yeah, and we go back at least every Christmas. So
Mm.
yeah, that is nice. We always wanted to move abroad, and actually years ago we considered like Australia or New Zealand, and we ruled it out because we thought it's just too far to go back and too much of an expense. Whereas France, it's obviously that part of it is easy, but the downside is the language. Well, it's just much harder to integrate for me
Mhm.
compared to Australia.
And that's the thing about relocating abroad anywhere. There's going to be pros
Yeah.
and cons to every destination, whether it's distance, language, food, weather, whatever it may be. There's always going to be some things that are going to be challenging or not ideal for us. I often say there is no perfect place in the world. There's always going to be something about the country or the region that there's just going to be some things that, we don't like. And I don't know anybody that lives anywhere that has said everything is absolutely perfect.
Yeah, true.
So, and so what about the cost of living from England to where you are now? Is it similar, more or less?
I would say it's fairly similar, but there's things that are more and things that are less. Um, so I would say for food, it's more expensive being here in France. Um, the things that are cheaper are childcare. I think is a lot cheaper. So if we want to have our kids looked after by the school in the holidays, the French system is very well set up for that. It's I think it's much better for working parents. So we would only pay €12 per child per day for them to be
Wow.
looked after in the summer holidays um, or whenever, or a Wednesday. They don't go to school on Wednesdays.
Oh,
Yeah, so I didn't know that when I moved here. So if you're thinking of moving to France, that's something
there's no
you should
school on
know
Wednesdays.
that I didn't know. There's just no school on Wednesdays, and then they do all of their clubs there normally. So you can sign up to. I didn't know any of this actually, and this is useful information. So
Hmm.
they have in September all the villages. I think this is nationwide. Um, but all the little villages have what I would call a freshers fair. I don't know if, as an American, you've heard that phrase.
Mm,
Okay, so
no.
for me, when I went to university, freshers are like the first years.
Okay.
What you call the freshmen?
Freshman, yeah, yeah,
Freshman year.
yeah.
So you go to like a big hall, and then every club has a little table, a little stool, and you can be like, oh yeah, I want to do basketball, I want to sing in a choir.
Oh,
And you have that in university? something like that at the beginning?
No, not that I recall. And I'm even trying to think back when my daughter was in school. I don't
Okay.
think not a fair like that where you can go and choose. I mean, they you would just if you wanted to play basketball, you'd have to try out for the team. If you wanted to do
Okay.
like dance, you would have to go to a dance class or studio and then register with that one.
Oh, okay. So what they do in English universities and in French villages, it seems, is in September the they have this day, like it'll be a Saturday, and it'll be most of the day, and you can wander around a little square in the village or a bit of park or something, and there'll be all of these tables, all of these stalls set up for all of the clubs that you can join. So we've all joined a club, and they're really affordable. I think they're like government funded, and they're run by volunteers. They're not for profit. Um, so I go to roller skating club, and my younger son Eric also does roller skating club. He goes to a different day to me, um, and then my older son Percy does basketball, and my husband does judo.
Okay.
So it's not, but it's in September. If you arrive in October, like you've missed it. Like you have to wait. Like you could probably get in October, but so we arrived in April, and Dan messaged a judo club, and they went, yeah, come in September. And he was like, that's strange. Why if they said come in September? And they didn't explain it. And then when it came to September, we were like, oh, right. So you go around this fair and you can talk to everyone and you can do a few lessons for free, like try out a few different clubs, and then you choose one and then you pay for the whole year. And if you're on a low income, it gets subsidized. Um, but they're like, I'm going to say for an adult club, it would be something like €130 for the year.
Oh, that's not much at all.
Yeah, no, for the whole. It feels a lot when there's four people in the family and you're paying in September for everyone. But then when you get to the end of the year, you're like, oh, like per session, this is every week. Sometimes I go 2 nights a week to my roller skating. One night's like roller dance and one's skating. Um, and then sometime like my son got his like basketball top with his name on it. That's all like included in the price. So it's amazing, really. So yeah, sorry, that was a big detour. So
It
on
no, it's
Wednesdays,
okay. Hmm.
on Wednesdays there's no school, and then this is just for primary school. So from age 11, they would have school. I think just in the mornings. Um, then a lot of kids will do all their clubs, their sports or music or whatever they're into. Will do that on a Wednesday.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It's and I think it's kind of a good thing. So I remember when I was young, a long time ago, um, on Wednesdays we had half days in Canada. I
Oh,
lived
really?
in a town in a small town, and Wednesdays we had half day of school, but we didn't have um any of the like the school had a basketball team, volleyball team, that type of stuff. I don't even think we had a dance, any type of dance like jazz, ballet, tap, anything like that. We'd have to go into the city if we wanted any type of music lessons. Like it was a pretty small town. But we did have half days. I don't now when I had my daughter, we were in a larger city, and so it was full days every day, and then extracurricular was always after school. So
Okay.
it's interesting that they have the Wednesdays off, and that's when kids have a chance to
Yeah,
do all their sports and things.
it's nice. And sorry, this is what I was originally saying. If you're a parent who's working on a Wednesday and you don't have time to take your kid to the clubs or whatever, you you just pay the school €12 for that day, and that's their full day in school, including meals, including 3 meals.
So what would the kids do all day if,
So then they're doing kind of fun they're doing like crafts and like games. It's more fun than normal school. It's a different people, so it's not the teachers. So I
mm,
think being a teacher in France would be a lot better than being a teacher in England, because they get Wednesdays off and they get a big long lunch as well, like nearly 2 hours, and they can just go home or whatever. Whereas I worked in education in England, and teachers on their lunch break have got to do like be on a rota, and they've got to stand in the playground, and or they've got to do like a homework club, or they're still like working on their lunch. They're not allowed to just go home.
right. Yeah, because there's still all the different supervision of all the different areas in the school. And 2 hours for lunch, that sounds very European because
Yeah,
I know from living in Spain, not with school wise, but just with work and businesses and things like that, that 2 hours for lunch is about normal. An hour and a half to 2 hours people would take for lunch. So they would go home or go to the cafe, or I know some people they say that they go home and have something to eat, have a nap, and then go back to work. And
yeah.
that's
Lots of the
pretty,
kids come home. It's your choice that you can take them home, or you have to pay if you want them to stay in for lunchtime.
yeah. And I believe the lunches that they have are quite good and healthy as well.
Yeah, and it's like a three-course meal. Um, yeah, I think it's nice.
Yeah,
They
it's
take their
not just
food
like some
very
hot
very seriously.
dogs
No,
and
no, no, no.
no, that's good. So that's really important for people to know if they're considering relocating to France and they have kids, knowing what the school system's like. They have
Yeah,
good meals, it's inexpensive, no school on Wednesdays, but they have that for extracurricular activities or things to do.
yeah,
That's really important information. I wouldn't have known that.
yeah. And don't arrive in April.
And don't arrive in April.
Wait
You want to
6
make
months
sure
to do a
you want to
whole.
make sure that you're there for September,
Yeah.
the very beginning of September. Otherwise, you're out of luck.
Yeah.
That's that's really interesting. I do think that that is a little bit strange, but I guess then though when they start as they're teaching whatever it is, whether it is karate, taekwondo, basketball, um, that everybody's kind of at the same point. They've been
Yeah.
teaching to keep everybody, um, I guess on the same page kind of thing. So other than that, I don't know why they just wouldn't have just like a gym where you can just sign up any time of the
Well,
year
I mean,
and
they do also have gyms, and they do
but,
also private companies would put on
mhm,
different uh, things. But if you want to make a profit, then you're not part of this scheme.
right, part of those
So I
programs.
used to work teaching English on a Wednesday, and that was like a club, but it wasn't. It was for profit, so they weren't allowed to be part of the fair. Um,
Okay,
but kids would come on a Wednesday because that's when they're not in school, and then they would learn English in a fun way.
right. Interesting. Well, that's definitely very, very different. And so what else have you found maybe like some of the benefits, the things that you really like about living there?
I really like the weather compared to England. That was one of the main reasons we chose to leave. Um,
Mhm.
because I think at the point that we left, a lot of things in our life were going well. I think like we had good jobs, and we had a nice house, and we had a lot of friends around us, and it did feel strange. But we just were like, if we don't do it now, we'll never do it. And
Yeah.
we talked about it for so long, and because remote working became a lot more of a thing then, and Dan managed to find a remote job that was based in Europe. Um, we thought, let's just take this opportunity to go now, because in the north of England, like it is grey, and I I think we're both people who were really affected by the weather.
Mhm.
Just it did get us down a bit in the winter. I think just the grey all the time.
It affects me. Part of the reason why I left Canada was the winter, and it wasn't so much gray because my home city was Calgary, so it could be
Oh yeah.
clear blue sky, sun shining, and minus 30 degrees Celsius outside.
Wow. Yeah, it's very
And
North Calgary, is it?
it's not really, but it's high.
Okay.
It's a high
Sorry.
elevation. It's very close to the Rocky Mountains.
Okay.
And so it would be a bit deceiving because and I've worked for home for probably like 20 years. And so I could be sitting in my office and the sun shining in and it looks beautiful and there's snow on the ground and it would be freezing cold outside. And just all the snow and I hated it. I hated it. Even now people are like, "Oh, well, you must ski or snowboard," and no, no, I hated winter. I didn't enjoy going on
Oh
like
really?
I absolutely hated it. And I would be miserable, honestly. So I get it. The only thing that really, for the last kind of year or so when I was there, that really kind of helped me through is I would go to the tanning bed once a week for 10 minutes. And it was just 10 minutes to just like warm myself up. And I would go to hot yoga once a week as well. And
Oh
so that,
nice.
obviously it's quite hot. But I first moved to Costa Rica. And when I first moved there for the first, I think about 2 years, when I would go to the beach, I would lay out in the sun and just be like, oh, sun, thank gosh. And just lay there. And after about 2 years, then I was like, okay, it's hot, it's sunny. Where's the shade? So I would joke around with my friends and said it took me 2 years to actually warm up from living my entire life in Canada. Um,
Oh, to just
so the
defrost.
weather is a big thing. And there
Yeah.
are people like with the grayness, you're not getting enough vitamin D. And there
Yeah.
are studies that prove that it does affect people's happiness, it affects their life, it affects their productivity, everything when they're not getting enough sunshine and they're not happy with that.
Yeah. Sorry, do you live? I thought you lived in Barcelona.
Well, so I'm originally from Canada,
Okay.
but I've lived in several different countries. Barcelona, I'm still there kind of part-time, casually, also in
Okay.
Montenegro, um, as well, which is also in Europe.
Yeah.
But I have lived in Costa Rica. I many, many, many years ago. I lived briefly in Italy for a little while, and then moved back to Canada, and then to Costa Rica, to Spain, to Montenegro. And
Okay. You moved a lot.
potentially next year, I'm looking at a few different countries in Asia to
Okay.
maybe
Wow.
uh, settle down. My ideal is to have four homes in four different countries and then
Wow.
just kind of split my time between those, following the wonderful
Each
weather.
season.
So I'm never in winter, never in rainy season, and then still have my friends that I still get to see
Yeah, yeah.
through the year in different countries.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see if it actually all pans out, but I do travel quite a bit and I'm on that path. And for right now I enjoy it, but who knows, maybe in 10 years time I'll think four places is too much and I want less than that.
Maybe you
But
could just
we'll
find
see.
one place on the equator that's just permanent sun.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Costa Rica was pretty close to that. Like the sun would come up and it would only vary by about 45 minutes throughout the year. So I remember several times people would be
It's pretty
walking
good.
on the beach and they would be like, "Oh, excuse me, do you know what time it is?" And I would look at the sun. I would look up and I'd be like, "Yeah, it's about," and I would say what time it was. So they would look at me weird and I'm like, "Oh, you really want to know?" And I would pull it out and every time I was within 15 minutes
Oh,
because
really?
I just because it doesn't change so much, right? Like in Canada,
Yeah.
it changes so much.
Yeah, in England
But
as
there it
well.
was
Like,
only within 15 minutes, or sorry, within 45 minutes. So I would know roughly what time of the day it was by where the sun was positioned.
okay.
That was old school, like going back before
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But it was and it's nice. The only for me where I was living though was too quiet. There was probably I don't even know if there was 20,000 people in town, and then coming from a city of well over a million. I was there for about 4 or 5 years, and then I just started to get bored. It's like there just wasn't enough going on. You can only go to the beach so
Yeah.
much, and yeah, you can go surfing, but just I need more variety of
Okay.
things to do. So I love the city, and that's what I love about Barcelona. I love going there. There's always tons of stuff going on and
Yeah, we're
meetups,
not
and
far from Barcelona. We've been a few times.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
2.5 hours away.
Yeah, yeah. But then at a certain point, there's so many people and there's so many
Yeah,
tourists, and I'm just like, I'm tired of so many people. And
yeah,
then I go to my home in Montenegro. I love it because it's quiet and it's beautiful, and it gets busy in the summertime, but it's not too bad. But then after a while, I'm bored because there's not enough going on. And then I either
yeah,
go back to Barcelona or I have travels in between. And that's kind of what it is. And then I come back to Canada, usually at least once a year. The past few years have been a few more times. There's been some illnesses in the family, so I've been back a few more times, but probably starting next year again, maybe back to that kind of once a year time frame. And that's usually summertime, just
yeah.
because like I go maybe once every 4 or 5 years for Christmas. And and that's it. But and then that's just a short trip. In the summertime, I usually stay about a month or 6 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we enjoy the warm weather and going to the beach a lot.
Hmm.
Because I mean, we used to go to the beach in England. Liverpool is near the coast, but it's so different. And now I think if we had to move back, which is a possibility, even though I enjoyed the beach before, I can't enjoy an English beach again. It's just,
Yeah. It's just
it's
too
not the
different now. You've had
same.
so
The
much better.
sea's brown and cold,
Hmm.
whereas the sea here is like just turquoise and beautiful. I swam in a river today, and it's October, and
Okay.
it was getting a bit cold now, but still, I did it, and it was fun.
Yeah, yeah, that cold water. I remember going like whitewater rafting in
Yeah,
Canada, and even in the summertime, it's still wetsuit and it's cold water. And then especially that now compared to since I've left, like I'm really just a warm weather, warm water person. I get cold really easily when I go back to Canada and visit, and I have friends that they laugh at me now. They're like, it's not
yeah.
even cold. And I said, well, it is for me.
Yeah,
Because
that's what
even,
my kids are like now that when they
yeah,
go back, we went back last Christmas and my son stepped off the plane into a puddle and he said, "Oh, I just stepped in that puddle because I forgot what they are."
yeah, yeah, it's always different. And we see things differently when we go back. Sometimes I find, and with different people that I've talked to sometimes too, it's things that don't, when we go back, there's certain things that seem worse than what we thought that they were, but then there's other
Yeah,
things that seem not as bad as we thought they were while we were living there. And it just depends on, our perspective or where we're at now.
yeah. I find it strange when I go back and I go to a supermarket and I can understand what everyone's saying because I'm just not used to that. And I feel like I'm hearing people's private thoughts that I shouldn't be hearing, which is like madness. But because I can understand some French, but just other people chatting in a supermarket, you're not really like tuning into that. So it doesn't really go into my head. And then when I'm in a supermarket in England, I'm like, oh, this is strange. I can hear everything people are saying, and they're not even talking to me. Like it feels weird to me.
Yeah. Well, and probably because when you were living there, you didn't pay attention, right? We would just kind of
No, no,
tune it out
it was
and not pay attention because it's then
yeah,
just voices and sounds. But and the same thing happens in France for you. That's like me in Spain because my Spanish isn't very good. That I hear people, but I'm not paying attention because I would
yeah. I switch
have
off
to
to
pay attention to understand. And then when I go somewhere where it's English speaking, right, like I hear so much more. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. But it's because I understand and recognize all the conversations that are going on.
Yeah.
But it
We love
is,
as well. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
Um, we never in England. We'd never been skiing ever. I mean, you wouldn't ski in England, but I've never like been on a skiing holiday or anything like that. Um, and my perception of people who went skiing was like, well, they're quite like you'd have to be like relatively privileged to do that if you're in England because you have to buy the flights and all the equipment, and it was just this kind of like other world of like just a thing that I'd never done, and I didn't know that many people who had done it. And then here, so we're in the Pyrenees. Um, we can drive up to a place to go skiing. I think it'd be an hour and a quarter. Um, and so we could just go for the day. You can hire stuff, and I'm surprised that they just let you go down. Like anyone could just turn up and be like, "Yeah, can I have a ski pass, please?" And then you can just do it, and nobody's telling you not. There's no like rules or anything. Whereas when I did have one lesson in like an indoor ski place in Manchester, and they were very like, "Oh, you can't like, you're not allowed to go down the big slope until you've learned all the skills."
Well, you really wouldn't want to because
I know,
the
I
different
enjoy
runs can be quite dangerous and very difficult.
it.
Like those black diamonds, I've
Yeah,
skied
yeah,
a couple times in my life, but I'm like
yeah. I'm
I
not
would
talking
be
about going down the black
I would
ones.
still be like bunny hill and probably
Yeah,
fall down now. So yeah, there's some safety reasons for that. But you're right,
yeah.
anybody can just go buy a ski lift, rent the equipment, and
And then
off they
just
go.
go for the day. So we had a really fun time doing that, and we were learning at the same time as our kids, so it was kind of a fun thing to do together.
Mm. That's also another great thing about just being in different locations. The activities that we're able to
Yeah,
do that are readily available,
yeah,
right? That we can go to, and for some it could be skiing. For others, it's going to the beach.
yeah,
Um, whatever it may be, and hiking and all of that. And that's another reason why I do also like Barcelona is because it's really close to the mountains as well.
yeah,
You can on a train be in the mountains in probably a couple of hours. Um, and then just in the oh, what do you call it? My mind's just gone blank. Not quite in the mountains, but when you're getting into those hills and into the mountains and so the foothills of the
yeah,
mountains, it's nice for all kinds of hiking, and there's all kinds of vineyards too
yeah,
around Barcelona. And then of course just
yeah.
all the
You
other
got
little
everything there.
towns, right? And obviously France is right there, and Andorra as well,
Yeah,
between
yeah. We
France
went to
and Spain.
Andorra one day because we live kind of on the road between Perpignan and Andorra, like
Oh,
much closer
okay.
to Perpignan, but it's just kind of a straight road. Um,
Mhm.
well, I mean, it's not a straight road; it's a winding road, but it's like
It's
one
a
road.
direct, it's kind of like the direct
Yeah,
route. Yeah.
that just gets more and more mountainy. So we went there one weekend just to see what it was like. It was great.
Oh, that's good. I have not been to Andorra yet, but with all the time
Okay.
I've spent, and I've done a lot of traveling through Spain, but just haven't quite made it to Andorra yet. Just because in part I want to go in the summertime because I don't I don't care to go in the wintertime when it's cold and snowing, but I do hear they've got some amazing spas, and hiking trails, and obviously all the skiing and stuff in the
Yeah,
winter.
and it's a bit of a tax haven, so
It is.
you can get my top tip that we didn't know at the time was we went there and we filled up with fuel here for a big journey, and then when we got there, fuel was like half the price. So next time we go, we'll go on at half a tank.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always but it's sometimes it's with those things that you have to, you do it, and then that's when you learn. It's like, oh, now I
Yeah,
know.
we cross the border and go to Spain just to get cheap diesel sometimes, and and shop it. Like we there's this place Jonker that's like just across the border, and it's
Hmm.
just full of French people getting cheaper food.
Really
Yeah,
interesting. I know Spain is generally quite cheap for food compared to some of the other European countries.
yeah. It's not for everything, but there's some
Hmm.
things, and French people definitely all go there to stock up on things.
Well, I mean, it makes sense. I
Yeah.
was also told too at one point when I was in Barcelona a while ago, and I was needing eyeglasses. And a friend of mine, she's like, "Don't get them here. Go to France. They're way cheaper to get eyeglasses in France." I said, "Really?" She said, "Yeah." She's like, don't get them here." I said, "Okay." I ended up coming back to Canada and just getting some here in Canada. But yeah, it's interesting that certain countries will have certain things that are less. And if you're close or you want to go on a holiday, because a lot of people too in North America just don't realize how cheap a lot of the travel is within Europe.
Yeah.
And I say to people, like, if I end up spending over 100 euro on a flight, I'm usually a little bit angry because
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah, me
know
too.
how much cheaper a lot of times or further planning out. And not and some people, and I don't mean further planning out like a month or anything like that. Like it can be, but for people that are listening, like we can go online and sometimes there's just certain days, sometimes it's a couple of weeks out that, a price tomorrow would probably be 150 euro, but in a week and a half time, it'll be 34.
Yeah, yeah. I
Like it,
went to visit my sister lives in Leeds in Northern England, and there's the from Perpignan you can't fly many places at all, but you can fly to Leeds in the summertime. Um, and she'd just had a baby, and I looked at flights, and I found a flight for 40 euros return, Perpignan to Leeds, and I went to go and see her just for a couple of days, just to like hold the newborn baby, which
mhm,
was amazing. And then the taxi from her house to the airport, which was like just a few miles, was like the same price as that whole return flight, which was ridiculous.
right. I I don't know how they're able to price flights the way that they do. I mean, these are all, and for people listening, like they're very basic, like a flight.
Yeah,
Sometimes you even have to pay for a carry-on bag. Sometimes one might be
yeah,
included
yeah, yeah,
depending upon the airline. But and that's why a lot of people within Europe though they can travel for just the weekend. They'll
yeah,
leave on a Friday and come back on Sunday or Monday because it's inexpensive. And what do you need for 2 days? You don't need a bunch of luggage and a whole bunch of things. So if there's like I have one very large, I don't even want to call it a purse, but it's like a
yeah,
big purse, but it fits under the seat that I could have things in there for 3 days, easy, and that would be enough for me because it's really big and it does fit under the seat. So if two people even are traveling, like one carry-on bag, if you're going for 3 days, is enough.
yeah,
So it is that is one of the benefits too. I think is the cost of flights and travel for people who like to travel. So you have to kind of weigh those costs of, okay, what am I paying? A big thing that people are concerned about are taxes. What do I pay for taxes? Well, and what does that include? Right? Like healthcare, does it
yeah,
include what other things is that all including? And then what am I paying for food? What am I paying for travel I like to do or extracurricular activities that I like to do? And then to really kind of compare the total, because sometimes when we look at just one thing compared to one thing,
yeah,
it's going to be out of balance. It's
yeah,
not going to be the same. But if we look at like the whole picture of this is the lifestyle I have, these are all the things that I do, this is the similar type of housing and everything like that. That's the best way to compare to see the lifestyle that you're going to maintain, or if you can afford more because of everything that is included. And just for me with the cost of food and groceries and travel and things like that, Spain, it's great. I compared to Canada, it saves so much money.
Yeah. I
Yes.
think a lot of people I meet here have moved from the south and they from the south of England. So they had a house in London, like a little tiny flat, and then they've swapped that tiny flat for like a big house with a pool here. So they feel much better off. But from me coming from the north, it's pretty similar house prices, really, of what we had in
Hmm.
Liverpool compared to here.
Hmm. But you got better weather.
Yep, better weather, definitely.
Better
Yeah,
weather.
some
Yeah.
things are definitely better. The transport, I'd say public transport is cheaper in general. My little local train, we're near a train line, and wherever you go on that train line, sort of either towards the mountains or towards Perpignan, it's just €1 wherever you're going.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's good.
Very inexpensive.
Yeah, but then other trains, there's another train line that goes along the coast, and that seems to be a different system that's more expensive. So I don't know why.
Well, I think too it depends because there's a few different companies that offer train service, so they do charge differently
Yeah, I don't
for
know if
those
because
services.
that's more tourist route,
Mhm.
or I'm not sure the reasons, but this train like, it's quite infrequent, but when you can get it, it's good. Can't complain for €1.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that doesn't even probably buy you a liter of gas.
I know.
So. Well, Hannah, I just want to thank you very much for your time today and all the information that you gave. A lot of it, even I was didn't know about, so I know the listeners got a lot of valuable information. And so I just want to say thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. It was fun to chat.